Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What is the most insane, evil, funny, dumb way a spouse has tried to screw the other? Worked at an airport. Big burly guy brings an ugly ass dog in a crate to the counter. He is clearly misty eyed. Turns out wife got the dog in the divorce and he has to send it to her, and she told him as soon as she gets it she is putting it down. He asks if he can have some time with the dog before the flight, so they go out in the grass and they both roll around in the grass. Dog's tail just wagging away, not knowing anything about his future. The guy puts him back in the crate, drops him off the counter, says thanks, and then just walked out hair down and just looking crushed. That was 30 years ago and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I'm going to school to be a vet assistant. My teacher is a veterinarian. She told us on Monday she's had clients bring their animals in to be euthanized so their spouse couldn't have them. SMDH. This one hits close to home because it happened between my parents. We had a family friend who was a lawyer and my parents agreed that he would be the lawyer for both of them as a mediator. So, as the assets were being divided, my dad got absolutely slammed. She was going to get the house, cars, half his retirement, and an insane amount of alimony, to the tune of like $2,500 a month for the rest of her life. My dad has a good job as a municipal employee, but that was probably 70%ish of his paycheck. Turns out that my mom and the family friend actually conspired to rip my dad off and make it seem like that's what a divorce settlement looks like, and she was going to kick back more money under the table after the dust had settled. Dad just didn't know how these things worked. So, after some convincing, he finally went out and got his own lawyer. He got a very fair divorce settlement after that. Mom still to this day can't understand why we don't talk to her much. I work for a divorce attorney now, but the craziest thing came to my attention when I worked for the prosecuting attorney. This couple was breaking up and Mr. left the house. Mrs. went to work the next morning as usual. When she returned home in the evening, she found Mr. had been to the house and removed his clothing and belongings as she expected. What she didn't expect was that he had also gorilla glued her belongings together. He glued the TV remote to the table, the phone to its cradle, the couch pillows to the couch, and even glued the vacuum cleaner to the carpet. She called the police and reported this as property damage. The police went with her through the house documenting dozens of items glued to various things, but for days she was discovering random things and she would call to amend or update her report. My GD oven mitts were glued to the wall, or he glued the effing sheets together in the linen closet. I've seen people do and say really awful things to each other, but that was diabolical. Had a client whose wife wanted him out of the house. I told him not to leave. Just move to a different bedroom for the time being, because once he was out the chances of him ever getting back in was slim. He texted his wife and told her he was staying in the house. She called back and left a VM that she wanted him out, and if he wasn't out soon, she would start taking out her unhappiness on the children, and would remind the children that mommy was being mean to them because daddy wouldn't leave. TL. Doctor, my client's spouse accused him of giving his deceased wife cancer. I represented a guy who was on his second marriage. His first wife passed away from cancer. He and his kids were obviously devastated. My client was a pretty sensitive guy with a big heart. His second wife could be very charming, which was why he fell for her, but it was all a facade. Anyway, to make a long story about a lengthy divorce short, my client met a very kind and affectionate woman during his case. They really hit it off and were basically engaged, even though his divorce was far from over. The fiancé started having health problems and was diagnosed with a form of terminal cancer. Somehow the second wife found out about this and tried to use the cancer diagnosis against my client in court. She developed this crazy theory that my client had killed his first wife by giving her cancer and that he was doing the same thing to his fiancée. The second wife's attorney, who was quite good, refused to be a party to it. The attorney never addressed the argument in court and didn't even ask the second wife any questions about it during testimony. Rather, the attorney informed the judge that the second wife wished to address the court directly about an issue. The judge allowed her to do so, in a highly irregular move. The second wife told her crazy conspiracy theory to the judge, adding that she was certain my client had tried to give her cancer at some point as well. I wish I had an artist's rendering of the scene, capturing the second wife's crazy eyes, her attorney's look of shame embarrassment, the judge's look of confusion ennui, and my look of awe-inspired disgust. Divorce lawyer here. Spouse had been out of the house for weeks. She waited until he was on a business trip, came into the house, turned on all of the faucets, plugged the drains, turned off the furnace, and left. It was -10 degrees. He came back 5 days later. The house was ruined. The water froze and cracked the foundation. I was an assistant for a family law practice, not a lawyer. So it was already a disaster of a divorce because the ex-husband was a D. But it got so much worse when the wife started dating someone new with a severe cat allergy like a year after they split up. Her psycho ex bought a cat on his time with the kids. Except he's not allowed pets at his apartment. He sends the kids back to their mom's house with a cat and all its stuff. Mom is pissed because she didn't want a cat at all, plus her boyfriend is crazy allergic. She calls us asking what to do because her kids are bawling, saying that she can't get rid of their new sibling and she has the cat in the garage. Ex told kids if mommy loves you, she'll let you keep the cat since daddy is not allowed cats at his house. I read one where in the settlement there was shared custody of a parrot. Neither were allowed to teach the parrot to swear at the other one. She accused her ex-husband of sexually molesting their children while under the watchful eye of the nationally endorsed social workers who oversaw his contact with them, which was only required because he didn't have his own private accommodation at the time. She also said that his Indian flatmates were inherently dirty. After the obviously false child molestation suggestion, I warned her of the consequences of being caught lying about that. That is, permanent loss of custody. She fired me but kept calling back using fake names to try and obtain free advice which contradicted my advice. But everyone she called immediately spotted her. This was a long time ago and now I specialize in insurance litigation, which is far less ugly. My uncle's ex tried to work it in that she would get half of whatever my grandmother would leave him when she passes. Joke's on her. My grandmother is passing over her kids, not maliciously. My uncle is very well off and so is my mom, and leaving everything to my brother and me. Oh. Also tried to get sole custody of both of their children, who are in their 20s. Not my divorce. But my divorce lawyer told me about a case she was involved in where both clients were so petty that they had to all meet to argue over literally every single scrap of everything. The final object that neither would settle on was a ceramic rabbit statue. A really generic one from Home Depot or whatever. Zero sentimental value, but since it was the final item, either side wanted to lose the last thing and they dragged it out over 3 separate meetings for this one thing. I don't remember which ended up getting it. But once they settled it and signed everything, the winning party stuck it on their lawyer's desk as a gift and walked out. Not a divorce lawyer, but remember this from another Reddit. Husband and wife getting divorced. There was the classic car, Ferrari, Jaguar or something like that was worth a lot of money. It was a bone of contention in the divorce. After several months the husband finally proposes that he will let her have the car if she gives him the house. She agrees. Come to find out he had been taking the car out every day and doing loops around the city for hours, putting thousands of miles on it, making it worth nothing. Friend was going through divorce from insane husband. He had been texting her pics of the gun he bought and threatening her. Police were called. Nothing they could do because it was only a picture. He was staying with a secret girlfriend at this point. She allowed him to go get his stuff from the house. She was scared to go back in the house alone. I went with her. First red flag was he had changed the locks, so we waited for locksmith to open the house and change the locks again. Well, when the door opens, we noticed all of the furniture was gone, so we carefully went upstairs in search of her cats. The entire second floor was empty, no cats, no furniture, even her clothes were gone. Come to find out he hired a moving company to pack and take everything, even the food in the fridge. Finally found the cats. He had taken them to another vet in town and put them up for boarding under his sister's name, thinking she would not be able to find them. He was finally forced to disclose what happened to her possessions. He had them taken to a storage unit far away from the home. Once had a boss who had to leave his house for 6 hours while his ex-wife grabbed all the belongings she was legally entitled to. When he returned home, every knob and handle was gone. Doorknobs, cabinet handles, drawer handles, anything that was screwed onto something and used to open it, she had taken. Every day for the next week he would occasionally yell out she took the duck-ine knobs. I see a lot of unsubstantiated accusations of child abuse and or molestation to deteriorate the relationship between dad and the kids. And we'll hire experts and therapists and there will be an investigation. We'll have depositions and a trial. And after a year has passed without dad being allowed to see his children and thousands of dollars have been spent, it will come out that nothing happened. This happens in my practice about once or twice a year. Very common. I didn't handle the divorce. I handled parts of the aftermath. In the divorce, she went to Wall, was living in a truck somewhere, and just couldn't handle it mentally. He gave her 5 of his 9 companies. They were the ones that owed 7 figures in payroll taxes. He had made her the bookkeeper on paper. She spent decades trying to shake the IRS for the results. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but my prior employer once was served with an obviously forged garnishment order from an employee's ex-wife, directing garnishment of his wages in an amount that far exceeded his actual wages. We reported it to the police department. A soon-to-be ex-husband left his wife's prized koi to die on the doorstep of their house. Apparently the value of these fish, 6 in total, was over $100,000. She was, according to her lawyer, so distraught that she couldn't be in court, only in LA. Paralegal for a divorce lawyer here. Our client told us he didn't clear out the marital account after the parties filed, which technically is true, because while he removed $45,000 he left about $3.50 in there. Not my case, but during my first year of law school lawyers from different practices came to give us a peek behind the curtain of different areas. The divorce lawyer told the story of rather well-to-do couple that spent months and months and many tens of thousands of dollars fighting over absolutely everything, all the way down to a single ceramic ashtray. He couldn't remember the significance, but somehow it had come through the husband's family. Even after everything else had been decided, they spent many more months and nearly $100,000 fighting over just this ashtray. Then, after a court hearing, the wife finally won the ashtray. She promptly strode out to the white courthouse steps and smashed the ceramic ashtray, left the pieces all over for the husband to see on his way out. Decided that day I would not be a divorce lawyer. TLDR. Spent $100K to win an ashtray only to smash it in spite. Not a lawyer. I worked at Staples for 6 months in college. I only ever sold one chair mat because the cheapest one was crap and the nice one was $120-ish. One day a guy walks in who looks homeless. He looks distraught. I give him my normal "doing alright today, sir," and he tells me that he needs a chair mat, so I walk him back to show him the options. I told him that no one had ever bought one because the $30 mat is flimsy and the nice mat is over $100. He looks deeply into my eyes and says, "My wife left me today. She cheated on me and she's going to take everything. Give me the most expensive mat you have. If she wants it, I'll cut it down the middle so she can have her half." Ducking itch. I didn't really know what to say, but I came back with, "Well, we do sell protection plans for $9.99. If anything happens to it," he interrupted with, "duck it. Add it on there. Every dollar spent is one she can't have." I hope he's alright. I probably caught him on the worst day of his life. Got props from the bosses for not only selling a chai mat but also for the protection plan. I'm a lawyer but have had a very limited amount of experience in divorce cases. The first case I ever worked, the husband shaved, waxed every single hair off his body in an attempt to avoid a court-mandated drug test. Edit, a word. Husband and wife divorce after husband finds out wife sexting other guys. He goes into a deep depression. They didn't have much. Lots of debt and 2 dogs. One was a dog he had had since before the marriage. He got her. The other dog was only about 3 years old and was bought to keep the older, 7-year-old dog company while they worked. Wife demanded that since he got his dog that she got the other. He is depressed and just wants to move on, so he agrees. She gets the dog and has it put down the next day. She didn't want the dog. She just wanted to hurt him. Not a divorce lawyer, but my grandma ducked her divorce lawyer before she served her husband the papers. Got pregnant, and then convinced her husband it was his. He paid child support for 18 years and never had a clue. Pretty itty. The lawyer had a family of his own. They have no idea my mom and my family exist. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but my parents got divorced about a year ago. My mum didn't want my dad to show up in court because he would contest and then they'd have to split the assets. She phoned me and told me to put laxatives in his food so he wouldn't be able to make it there. My dad is a divorce attorney. His clients couldn't decide who would get the Labrador puppies from a new litter they just breed. The pups are worth $1,000 a pop. Well, they also hadn't been up to date on their payments. So dad brought a litter of 8 floppy puppies home as collateral for us to have until they could negotiate the settlement. So much fun for us kids. Former divorce lawyer. Not so much insane, but unfortunately common. Accusing former spouse of molesting the children and domestic violence to retain full custody and get a restraining order to force spouse out of the marital home. This sets the new status quo for custody, which judges are reluctant to disrupt considerably down the road. Takes months if not years for accused spouse to prove his innocence, and CPS will often find evidence where none exists if accusing party is a good enough manipulator actor. Pretty horrendous long-term outcome for all parties. Kids are brainwashed against a strange parent when young. Later they often grow to resent the accusing parent for poisoning their relationship with a strange parent. Kids often grow up with multitude of mental health issues. Probably one of the worst things a person can do to their children, all to win against their former spouse. Again, not a divorce lawyer, but 30 years ago a friend of mine was going through a messy divorce. His wife had cheated on him and was trying to take him for everything. Really spiteful when she didn't get something. The court had instructed her to turn over the car to him. She waited until the last day on the order and then returned it with serious body engine damage. It was pretty clear she'd run it into a wall or tree out of spite right before doing it. But since she just left it parked on the street by his apartment and dropped the keys in his mailbox, there was no way to prove it. I came up with a solution. Get it stolen. As a favor to him, I drove the car up to Harlem while he followed in his other car, parked it in front of some gang members, waved to them, blatantly tossed the keys on the driver's seat through the open window, and then got in his other car with him and we left. We went around the block, waited 10 minutes, went back and the car was gone. Car was never seen again. He reported it as stolen and collected the insurance. Not a lawyer, but my partner has a mate who was going through a messy divorce. He registered as a gambling addict and went to some Gambling Anonymous, or whatever it's called, and proceeded to go to the casino every day, taking wads of cash with him, pretending to gamble it all away, while he was secretly squirreling it all away. That way, when it came to the divorce and he was questioned where all his money went, he could prove that he lost it all through his gambling addiction and never had to pay her a penny.